All right. Good morning. It's hard to believe it's already October and it is mid-October. It's frightening how quickly time passes since we had our last session. So glad you could all make it. I'm actually kind of excited about this one. This is a topic that I find certain people will intuitively do well. Some people just naturally adapt to different styles, or they understand people really well and their needs, and they just seem to make it look easy. So working with lots of different types of people over the years, trying to find a way to help people understand how to, first of all, understand themselves, but also understand others. So we're going to, we're just getting a bit of feedback there. If anyone can't hear me or if something fails, let me know. I'm on a different, sadly, a headset died on me this morning. So yeah, make sure everyone's on mute if you can. Star 6 or in your mute button, just for feedback would be great. And I apologize if you hear a dog. I have a dog who just had surgery who's in the background. She may bark, but just try to ignore that if you can. This session really is one of my favorite type of topics because it really helps us understand others better and how to deal with them, whether it's a colleague, a friend, somebody, from a client perspective that's a little difficult and you're not really relating to really well, then this can actually help you a lot. Now, we're not going to have the chance to do this assessment. Getting a lot of feedback here, so make sure everyone's on mute, or if Carrie's on there, she can certainly put everyone on mute for me. There's always someone out there that we find challenging. There's somebody who you can't quite figure out, and hopefully this is going to help a little bit, because what we often do is we end up trying to adapt to something that doesn't work, and all of a sudden the relationship isn't quite what it needs to be. So this hopefully is going to help a lot with that today and the next day. All right, just one second here now. Technology's not with me. Here we go. We're going to talk about, first thing we're going to do is look at which styles we resonate with. So what is it about people that we actually really like and not so much? And everyone's a little different, so I really want you to think about that. Then we're going to look at DISC styles. DISC is an assessment that's been used for 30 years. And I'm going to take myself off in a second now. Take myself off speaker. Hopefully it won't hang up on anybody. So let me know if you can't hear me very well. So the DISC has been used for 30 years or so. They've adapted it. It's worked much better in the last number of years. It's been tweaked, and there's lots of great assessments out there. We're going to take the basics of DISC. If you've ever done it before, this could be a bit of a refresher for you. And we're going to start looking at the different styles, because there's lots of great learning. It's something whereby people can use it every day. You can figure people out in less than a couple of minutes and have a better way of working with them. In terms of the pros and cons of each style, they're all similar. They're all something that we can relate to. There's people in all the different styles. There's no right or wrong style, but each one has their pros and cons, so we'll walk through that as well. The biggest thing here, though, it's not just about us and figuring ourselves out. It's around how do we adapt to each other. So how do we adapt to the different styles? If I know I'm a certain style and you're a certain style, then what does that mean? How do I work better with you? And then we'll finally talk about maybe a few things you can do over the next little while to actually adapt to a style. So as we go through this, I want you to start thinking about one of the last exercises we'll do next session will be around an actual person. So there'll be a little exercise you're going to do. You're going to think, okay, well, if I'm this style and they're that style, what do I actually need to do differently, and how can that start? Okay? So we need to start working on that, and you can do it literally. After the next session, you can start using it right away. Apologize for my puppy in the background. She just had surgery. So if it gets overwhelming, please let me know in the chat. In terms of relationships, why do we really care? So how does it really impact us? I've asked this question before. And, when you think about different relationships and how it affects us, it's tremendous. One of the main problems, of course, is that we don't adapt. Right? We can often blame other people, we can judge other people, and we just don't adapt. And then all of a sudden it becomes a really awkward situation. It becomes a situation where we're just not working well with the client. You know how there's certain people that they can relate to a client and then you can't relate to that client? Well, let's talk about that. And of course, excuse me, within our own teams as well. So in terms of, see if I can get, there we go. Resonating with somebody. Let's start with that. Picture yourself on a plane. Picture yourself on a plane and you're really excited of the conversation you're having with the person next to you. Or you're just bantering back and forth on and off and it's really comfortable for you. I want you to think about what are one or two characteristics of how you connect with somebody. What is it about somebody that makes you personally feel connected? And please feel free to share in the chat. One or two comments would be great. And then I'm going to get you to, we'll start with that, and then we'll get you to think about what doesn't resonate with you. Okay? And sometimes you'll see similarities with some of the people. So anyway, think for a minute, maybe one word, phrase of something that you resonate with. Let's start with that. Kindness. Nice. And kindness could be lots of different things. Smiling could be part of kindness, actually. Personable, outgoing, friendly, open-minded, love it. Well-spoken. These are things that sometimes, and of course, everyone's uniquely different. So I guess a lot of you can probably relate to each of those, or maybe not, okay? Sometimes, interestingly, people will say, well, actually, sitting next to a person on a plane, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm just a person that does not want to talk to someone on a plane. I just want to sit there, put my earphones in, and do my thing. So that's perfectly fine too. But it may not be the person next to you, maybe wanting a chat. Doesn't mean others right, others wrong. It just means that it's a little different for them. Sorry, I'm trying to coordinate with a crazy dog here. So let's talk about what you don't resonate with. So just think of a couple of words or phrases of things you don't resonate with. All right. Let's see. We have rudeness, dishonesty, yelling. So someone who's quite loud. Sour-faced. Love that. Overconfident. Someone who's overconfident. Or sometimes confidence in general, sometimes people will say. Someone who's closed off, so they don't want to share, which may be perceived, right or wrong, as hostile. Absolutely. So there's lots of different things. And again, you know, some of them are similar, and some of them you may look at and go, I don't mind that so much. That's really not as big an issue for me. So each of us has a different person that we connect with. Oftentimes I'll see people who will meet somebody, and I think they're great, and someone will be like, nah, that's not really a fan. And that's perfectly fine. We're all uniquely different people in this world. So then the question is trying to figure out a little bit about what you are, a little bit of what they could be, and then how to basically close that divide so you can actually have a better relationship. Right. At the end of the day, the only person you can control is yourself. So oftentimes when I have people who are working with others and they're frustrated, and I say, you know, you can control yourself. You cannot control what other people do. You can't control how they behave. You're not going to change. Even if you have direct reports that you're trying to modify behavior, ultimately as a person, you're not going to change their ultimate way that they are. Maybe tweak some of their behaviors. So you can control yourself. So how I adapt to you, how I control my own behavior towards you can actually help that relationship. It can help build trust. It can help build a sense of connection. And sometimes, as you know, with certain clients, it doesn't take a lot. Sometimes you can actually make that occur. So we don't think of changing others, but we don't think of changing the world, but we don't want to change ourselves, essentially. Okay? Sorry. Crazy dog. So in terms of adapting, right, it's something that you think about the world. Animals adapt all the time. The strongest of the species that survived, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is the most adaptable to change. So how are we adapting to change? And some of us actually are better at change than others, but we can all do it. So let's start talking about what that could look like. All right. With DISC, one of the premises, which many of you have seen before if you've been on my webinars, is with regard to the golden rule. So the golden rule, do unto others as they would have them do unto you. And we've talked about this before, and this is really the premise of DISC in terms of what I like, how I like to be treated, could be very different than how you want to be treated. So at the end of the day, we actually need to do a shift and change how we work, whether it's working with our different clients, working with our different employees. We have to learn how to adapt. And that's the whole concept. It's not around just figuring out who you are. It's around how you adapt to others. So we'll move into that now in DISC, and we're going to figure out a little bit around what DISC is. Then we're going to talk about what DISC isn't, as well as what you are. I'm going to get you guys to kind of try to figure out what you are yourselves. And then we're going to work a little bit today and maybe a little bit, or finish it up next time, and we'll start out next time for sure in terms of adapting and what that looks like for the different styles. Lots of this stuff's online as well, so we don't have the luxury of doing the with each of you as such. You can absolutely find someone in your area that can do it. I use this all the time, but the premise is the same. And most people can sort of figure out where they fall, even without doing the assessment. So let's see what we can come up with. With DISC itself, it's not a personality assessment. Some people will say it's a personality assessment. It really is just looking at behavior, needs and behavior, and that's really what it comes down to. It's not around intelligence or education or even your values. It's around how you behave and the needs behind it. It's very simple in many ways. So again, we're going to look at the different traits. We're going to identify our own style, and then we're going to look at how to look at others and how to actually figure them out pretty quickly. It's quite extraordinary, actually, how quickly this can be used. I use this in all industries. There's not one industry I haven't used this in. I have people that have stuff up on their walls around it, people that use it specifically just for sales and client management. So there's lots of things, obviously for teams, but there's lots of things you can use it for. You can even use it for your personal life. Right, I've already got my kids all and I do understand a little bit more even through thinking about it from a DISC perspective. Not to judge one of my daughters, she's a little more challenging for me. She's complete opposite to me. So we actually complement each other really well, but sometimes it can create a bit of conflict. Talk a bit about that. So reading people, how do we read people? So if you're going into a room, how would you notice? You've said a few things already. How would you read somebody in terms of how they're feeling or what they're thinking? Yeah, body language. Absolutely. That's one of the biggest ones. Facial expression. Love it. Yeah. How you're looking, how it's coming across. And of course, the words that people use, right? What you see, what you hear, the tone that comes into play. So we've got our verbal, vocal, and our visual cues that we notice. Some of us are better at this than others. So even with DISC, as easy as it is, we say to people, if you have someone in your team who can read people really well, use them, use that strength that they have. And they'll probably fall in one of the buckets of DISC that we'll look at now in a minute. So in terms of the 4 styles, does anyone actually, let me know if anyone's ever done this before, DISC, because certainly I'd love to get your thoughts on it as well, if you've ever seen it. There's 4 styles, and the one thing about, oh, actually, yeah, someone's seen it. Excellent. So please feel free to share if you have some comments or suggestions as we go through. So with regard to the different styles, just recognize, I'm going to give you descriptions now, and they're going to be quite extreme of the different styles. We're going to walk through this today. It's going to be a lot of information, and you're going to start thinking about different people. You're going to think about yourself. Don't judge it, though. Don't make a judgment call. I'm going to give you very extreme examples, but that's not what we all are. We all have all 4 of the styles. Every single one of them we have. It's just the amount of that we actually have. So I could be higher in the D, you might be higher in an I, someone else would be higher in an S. It just changes the way that we come across to different people and the impact that we make and our needs behind it. Okay? So our dominant style, which is probably the one that's judged the most. So when I explain this to you, you're probably going to understand why. The thing with the dominant style is that it tends to be a style that is judged because of the extreme nature. So if you find someone who's very high D, a very high dominant, they can come across a little bit more aggressive in their approach. Now, that's not everyone, and we do need Ds. And I think that's the big thing that I just want to stress with Ds, is that it's judged the most because of that. Having said that, we can't live without them, because what they do is solve problems. What they do is they make just sure the job gets done. They make sure that people are held accountable and the tasks are put to bed. They're actually occurring and you're meeting your objectives. Okay, but the dominant person generally is very direct in their approach. You know exactly what they're thinking, you know what they're feeling, not feeling as such, but you know the concerns that they have, shall we say. You know what they want and you know when they want it. They have a firm handshake, they look you in the eye. There's no pussyfooting around with these people, right? You know what it is. It's the elephant is out in the room. You know what the problem is. There's a lot to be said for that, as much as we can judge it as well in the extreme situations, okay? They love to solve problems. They can be very competitive. I'll give you more description. You'll see lots more information on this. They seem to be, they're more competitive at work and at home sometimes. So competitive, they like to win. They like to be the one to kind of cross that finish line. Okay? But if we don't have them, like I had one organization not too long ago that I did, 60 odd leaders with, and the majority of them, they're only like 3 or 4 Ds. So if you only have 3 or 4 Ds, you're not going to get things done. Things get delayed. People aren't getting held accountable. These people are great at having those difficult conversations, putting things out there. Apologize for my dog barking in the background. All right, so influencers. Influencers are very people-oriented. They solve problems through people. They love to connect with people. They do it really well. They can make very fast relationships. So often for some of you folks who may be in client management or related clients, some of you may be just stellar in this area. You're often connected to tons of people as well. If I'm looking for somebody to do X or Y or Z, you might say, oh, I don't know, but I know someone who does. Okay. The other thing about influencers, they're brilliant at brainstorming creative ideas and thinking outside the box. They have the ability to sort of think of possibilities. And that's one of their superpowers as well. Downside, they tend to be a bit disorganized. If some of you are out there like that, you might relate to this. A bit disorganized, not the best on follow through. Not that we can't do it. We like to do it if we're eyes. We do it because we have to, not because we like to, sorry. And they are quick in their pace. So the D's and the I's, which we've talked about now, are a little bit faster in their approach. They're quick. They're the first people to talk, tend to be a bit more extroverted. And they, sometimes in a meeting, they're probably mostly the talking, or at least at the beginning of the meeting. Now the steadies. So I'm sure you're thinking about people, whether it's yourself or others, and these as I'm walking through them. The steadies are the ultimate team player. The steady is somebody who is generally, they're not the first person to talk. They're amazing listeners, sometimes great mentors if they've been around the block a little bit. They're slower in their pace and their delivery. They're certainly not loud in their approach, generally speaking. They're slow pace. They have trouble, though, with change. Sometimes they don't like to do quick change. They need time to process it. So if you're one of those folks processing it in terms of, okay, you tell me about it, I need a few days to think it through, then you may have a bit of S in you. And there's another one, conscientious, we'll talk about, which could as well. So the steady is a slower pace, excellent in terms of team player. They're loyal almost to a fault. And sometimes I ask people who are high steadies, have you had trouble saying no? Sometimes that's a big piece for us. Now the last group is the C. Now, if you're someone who loves the detail and wants to make sure that the policy is perfect, everything is, all the ducks are in a row, all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, and it's just perfection, that's you. You're the person that makes sure the house doesn't fall down, the contract's in place, those folks that make sure all those details are going to happen, and make sure, as I said, the walls don't cave in around me. We need them to make sure that we execute in a perfect way. So we've got the D's that are problem solvers. They love coming up with solutions. They like to take it to the finish line. They're going to hold people accountable. So you've got those ideas and those problems getting fixed. You've got ideas and possibilities with your eyes that connect people together, that think about people and make sure that they're going to be working well together. The S is Slow it down a little, think it through, weigh the pros and cons. You know, the C's and S's like to do that. They're a little bit slower paced. They like to sort of take a step back, think it through, and they will actually be the person to say, no, that's fine. If the rest of the team wants to do it, I'll do it as well, right? They're the last person to step in and say no to something, which, again, could be a fault as well. And the conscientious executes to perfection. The research, the detail orientation is extraordinary. So if you think about those 4, there's a few characteristics in mind. I know it's a lot of information. Don't worry, I've got more coming. Hopefully you're enjoying it. The D's, certain words come to mind. So this might help you. If you're sort of thinking about yourself in a certain way, some of these words will come to mind. And when we're going to get you now to try to figure out in a minute what you think you are, and I've got another exercise to try to help you sort that out, or what your predominant may be. So risk taker, forceful, decisive, direct, self-reliant, and competitive. If those words kind of connect with you, any of the words that I read through these, then that's maybe you have a piece of that in you. And some of you are going to be much more of a blend than others. Some of us are very predominantly one, and then the others kind of fall there as well. So I might be like, 80% of something, and then maybe 40 or 30 or 20% of other things. Okay, so, one of these, though, I can promise there's got to be one that kind of resonates with you a bit more. Now, the next grouping, so I's, trusting, friendly, enthusiastic, influential, sociable, and optimistic. So that will be more of an I. With S's, it's calming, it's steady, it's loyal and consistent, and patient and relaxed. So, and the last one, not surprisingly, as I described the C, is analytical, courteous, actually quite polite in many ways, focused, systematic, fact finder, right? So these are sort of the characteristics of each one. So I want you to start thinking about yours, but another quick exercise we'll talk through. Now, there's a different way to look at the different styles. We've got direct and indirect. I said earlier, you're going to kind of know what the opinion is of a D, well, as I's as well. They're the first ones to talk, the D's and the I's. You kind of have a sense of where they're headed. They're a bit more direct in their approach. There's someone who's going to probably shake your hand a little firmer. You're going to look you in the eye. It's absolute, you know exactly what you're getting. Well, to some extent. The indirect is a little different. So with the direct behaviors, so start thinking about this now, because I'm going to get you guys to figure out if you think you're more direct or indirect. So with direct, you've got, you're a little less patient, a little more competitive. So less patient, yes, I can speak to that myself a little bit. My patience isn't perfect. I have a little bit of one of those in me. If you can, I'll get you to figure me out in a couple minutes. So looking at you in the eye, again, contributing to groups quickly. And actually, another one there, likely to introduce yourself to others quicker. So if you go to a group setting, say you're going to an IBAN's event, you're probably likely to go up and shake someone. Oh, hi, you're so-and-so. You're over at that brokerage. Hey, here's me, and I heard about you, or we've got a mutual client in some way, shape, or form, whatever it may be. So that's the direct behavior. So is that more you, or is this a bit more you? Are you someone who's probably less likely to go up and introduce yourself? Are you someone who is a little bit more patient and cooperative? Are you someone who is probably waiting for others to speak and then you're going to speak because you're thinking about it? You're thinking it through and you're thinking, what's the best way to contribute to this group? Okay, so now pick between A through D. Do you think you're someone who is more direct, or do you think you're someone who's more indirect? And I just want you to write the letter down, or remember it. That's fine too. Let's see if I can calm my dog down while you're doing this. We're going to walk down through the next grouping now in 1 second. Okay, so if you have that done, we're going to walk through open and guarded. And with open and guarded, it's essentially, the difference is very much similar to, a few words might make sense. Someone who's a little bit more open in their approach. So there's a friendly element. You feel very connected probably quite quickly with this person. They're often open to share about their private things. They're probably somebody who that you can connect with in a way that you understand their vulnerabilities. Sorry, was there someone on the call? Sorry, someone trying to say something? I'm sorry, I think someone's trying to talk. If you can write it in, can't quite hear. All right, well, you can let me know. Okay, so open behaviors. Oh yeah, I'm getting a lot of feedback there as well. Something's definitely going on in our system. If everyone can make sure they're muted, pull the phone away from me. So you've got an open behavior. I always sort of say the big one here that really stands out is the ability to be vulnerable around people. Do people share, would a person likely be open and friendly, but also be willing to say, oh, I don't know if I'm really comfortable with that. Makes me feel a little uncomfortable. I'm really worried about that. That's definitely more aligned to someone who might be open. Okay, so think about yourself. Guarded. Are they a bit more private? Do they have, it's a little more formal in their approach. They're, not likely to probably touch you. They're probably going to stay on the subject. They're not going to go off on a tangent. They're certainly not going to talk about what they did on the weekend or to any degree. Okay? All right. There's echo on the line. So someone said, let's see if we can guess. Still an echo. Okay. Somebody said there's caller number 31. So somebody's not on mute. Let me see if I don't know if I can do that. I'm just going to see if I can possibly mute somebody. Let's see. I can see some people are muted. Some people are on web. If you're on the web, if you could just make sure that you mute your computer would be great. Because I think you're hearing the echo as well. So I've got a few people here. I don't want to call out names, but if you could all just make sure. Yeah, I'm just going to see. I don't think I can mute. Yeah, it is caller number 31. I'm not sure who that is. Just one second. I'm going to see if I can fix it here on my end. I might, just one sec. I think Carrie has to be the one to do that. Okay, I'm just going to see someone made a suggestion they were going into a different mode. Huge apologies, folks. I'm just going to show all the controls here, see what I can do. Okay, can't seem to do it. Is the feedback still on there? Yeah, I can hear it myself. Okay, so if everyone could just take 1 second and look at their computer, and I'm really sorry, just 1 second. I'm going to try to see if I can change things, but I don't think I have access. Just 1 second now. I'm just going to note to Carrie. Apologies, everyone. Just 1 minute. Double check you're on mute because I can see exactly who it is, and you're not muted. Just 1 second. Okay, I sent a note. I'll see if things can change. I'm just going to go on. So hopefully I'll speak fully. Just to get to the next exercise, and hopefully Carrie will get on and fix it. And I apologize, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure this doesn't happen again. So somehow I have access to mute. All right. Apologies, folks. So with regard to the guarded behaviors, the opening guarded behaviors, I'm going to get you to take a second and think about where you fall between 1 and 4. So you've got your letter for your direct and indirect. This is for your guarded and open. All right, if you have that done, I'm going to get you to have a look now while we're waiting for Carrie. Hopefully we'll get that note to rate yourself with regard to, not rate yourself, look at your letter. I'm sorry, feedback here. It got muted. Awesome. So hopefully it's better. Can you hear that now? Hopefully, can you guys let me give me a chat back here. Good, excellent. All right, caller 31 is muted. Yes, we are off to the races. Thank you so much, everyone. Huge apologies. Okay, let me get the chat back up here. Perfect. All right, we're back out there. So see where you fall. Pick your, so for example, if you are a C2, if you look where that lines, you'd be a D. If you're an A4, you would be an S. So I'd like you to just kind of have a quick look at it. Don't judge it. Just be curious about it. If some of you are like, that doesn't seem like me, just think about it, okay? And we'll walk through it a little bit more, and hopefully that'll help. Another way that we actually look through DISC is with regard to how fast. So I sort of mentioned earlier that your D's and your I's are a bit quicker in approach, okay? So someone who's faster and someone who's slower. Someone who is task-oriented and people-oriented. So you're faster and slower. It doesn't mean that necessarily you're slow. You're just slower than a D or an I. And you're faster than a C or an S. Okay? In terms of task people, so the C's and the D's are task-oriented. They're not people, they want to get it done. They're not going to talk about necessarily private, personal things. They're not going to talk about the weekend. They just want to get to business. And that's okay. And for some people that really want to connect with people and have that real personal relationship at work or with your clients, sometimes it's not appropriate. I have clients that fall in all these buckets with all the people that I work with. And with the people side of things, I find sometimes because I fall in that category, or some of me does, can judge the task people. Like, they don't want to talk to me, or they don't want to talk to me about how they did on the weekend, or I didn't know their kid was doing this or that. That's perfectly fine. We've talked about judging before. We don't want to judge people. We want to meet where they are. We want to meet their personal needs. Okay? So that's another way that we can start looking. When we start talking about how to judge, how to figure out ourselves in this one thing. The next step, once we learn a bit more, is going to be how do we actually adapt to others. So if we know someone is an I and I'm a C, then what does that mean? Okay, so we're going to learn a little bit more about this as well. One of the biggest things, though, I find, so if I'm working with someone if I'm a strong D and I'm working with someone who's a C, that pace can become a bit frustrating. And you know who I'm talking about, because you're going to be one or the other. Think of someone who's on the other end. My husband, I talk about him all the time. He's perfectly fine with it, as many of you may know. He is much slower. So when I knew we needed to get a new vehicle recently, I figured it'd take us about 6 months. Realistically, it probably could have been about a year with him. He thinks it through. He takes his time. He noodles on it in his head, as he says. It's there. I'll sort it out eventually, right? I could have bought a car in a weekend, but it ended up taking us 9 months to get a car. But that's okay, right? Don't tell me it didn't cause a little stress, though. So some of us are faster, some of us are slower. The people-oriented people kind of want to have a bit of a chat. We want to connect with people. We want to have a sense of who you are, not just the task. The task people are like, let's just get to business. And that's the reason why they do. And they can do it very successfully. So no judgment there. But again, it does cause a priority challenge sometimes. Maybe a prime example of anyone is more technical, maybe you're IT oriented or you can work in the IT space so you understand technology. Sometimes technology has been put on hold because people aren't ready. So I think it was Volvo or Volkswagen put their self-driving car on hold for 2 years. It works perfectly. Tested up yin yang, everybody gets it works. All the bugs have been sorted, but the people aren't ready for it. Same thing with IT technologies. When you put a new system in place, task might be only one thing. Is it implemented through your systems? Does it connect with your other systems? But can people actually buy into it? So that's why we have task people that focus in that area. And sometimes us folks that have a little bit of a people element need to chime in and say, hold on now. That might be dandy, but we got to get buy-in from folks. And there's some people that are a little bit slower to change than others, and we have to work with them. The ultimate challenge, though, and if you think about a person in your head, which hopefully you've been thinking about through this presentation so far, is that person who is your opposite. They actually complete you such that if I'm faster, they're slower, they're people, I'm people, they're task. If we're opposite, so if I am an I, for example, possibly, and my husband is a C, then we are challenged in all the different ways. Having said that, we complement each other as well, right? We have all that is here, what you need. But again, it causes some problems. So in terms of conflict, somebody that you conflict with the most could also be your opposite. They could also be, funny enough, we actually end up having partners or relationships with people often opposite to us. So that's why we are brilliantly compatible many times and not all the time. So if that makes sense to you, then it's pretty common what I hear with clients as well. So in terms of the different styles, we have different ways of looking at it. And we'll look back at this a little bit more as well when we look at adapting. So, excuse me, with adapting, you'll have to figure out someone else. So with this one, though, you can see there's guarded. So you've got your guarded and your open, and you've got your direct and indirect. Okay, so this is where they kind of all fall. So when we're trying to figure those out more in our next session, you'll be able to figure out, you know, which one they are through these characteristics. Okay, and the people in task as well. So there's our people and our faster and slower. All right. So hopefully I've not got you all confused. Hopefully you're getting a little out of this. A couple of things I want to walk through, some more characteristics. So the needs of a D. Let's talk about the Ds. So think about that D in your world, or maybe it's you. So the needs of a D, they love to solve problems. Bring them something that they can sink their teeth into. They need to have some level of authority. They don't like to have everything imposed on them. They like to have a sense of a bit of freedom to kind of, you know, use their skills and make some decisions. So they tend to be decisive. They like to take a little bit of risk, push the envelope a little bit. With a D, policies and procedures, which you guys can relate to in your world, maybe aren't as strict. They're more guidelines for a D, or they'd like them to be more guidelines. They're happy to create some policies that make sense for the organization, but they don't want them imposed on them. Okay, they don't want to be constricted by them. They don't like not having control around them, which makes sense when you think about that. They don't like to control people as such. They just like to have a sense of control and impact on what's around them. So that gives you a little better sense with Ds. Ds, you know, don't like to lose, is one of their fears as well as losing. Friendly, they're optimistic and trusting. One thing about the I's under stress, so the D's under stress can become quite aggressive or look aggressive. I's can actually become quite sarcastic. So if you're one of those folks, my daughter says, Mommy, you're dripping in sarcasm again. So I'm very vocal, kind of giving it away. I'm a bit of an I. So sarcasm, oh, really? So I have to pick up more. Am I your maid now? Picking clothes off the floor. So when I get a little stressed out, the world kind of, you know, as we do in our crazy world, sometimes you can become a little sarcastic. One very important thing about I's as well is that we like approval. So I's do not like not to be liked. Okay, so if you're one of those people that likes to be liked, and when someone doesn't really connect with you, it kind of bothers you a bit, and you even think about it for a little while, then you probably have a little bit of I in you as well. The S, again, the S's are like stable routines, so they like a little bit of, not as much as the C's, but they do like a little bit of parameters and scope and having a sense of what's coming next. People have used the word routine oriented, but not so much as they just like to have a sense of what's coming. They don't want to be surprised. They don't react very quickly with surprises. They like to have a sense of thinking it through from a people and task perspective. So with the C's, they like their rules. They like the parameters. Give them their policies and their procedures. Give them their ways to work within, and they'll be happy to do it. S's, when they get stressed out, will pull back. And same with the C's. So many times, I think you've heard me say before, fight and flight. Everyone kind of goes one direction or the other. They tend to move into an argument or into that potential fight scenario when they get stressed out or they're in conflict. And S's and C's are more of a step-back approach. They're less likely to speak. So think about a meeting you've been in where people, or even with a client that's been a little bit aggressive. Some people won't say a heck of a lot. Other people will come in. Now, I'm saying in the extreme unfortunate scenario, you've got the S's pulling back too much and the C's, and you've got the D's and the I's coming have at it, going full tilt into an argument. So the C is actually like accuracy. One of the biggest fears of a C, if you're a C, you'll relate to this, is being wrong. And I don't mean someone saying they're wrong when they're not. I mean actually making a mistake. It can torment a C for months. At the same token, if you're a very detail-oriented C and you do a lot of analysis on something and you're putting a proposal to your boss or your colleagues or a client and it gets shut down and people don't even listen to all of the analysis and review that you've done, that can be extremely frustrating because you know what you think the client or your colleague or the company should do, but you're just not allowed to do it because somebody's overruled you. And I see that a lot. That's when a C generally will pull back, but they can actually become a little bit headstrong as well. All right, so I'm going to just one piece here I want to share. Don't have to read all this. With the S's, when you've got clients, now think about a client or an internal client or a colleague or a direct report that pulls back so that you're not quite sure how to read them, you don't quite know what's there. The thing is, an S is the one I want to comment on here. An S is someone who is less likely to speak up. They are someone who you actually have to start asking questions. An S would be a client who didn't renew but never told you why. They may have been able to come back to you, and I'm sure you've experienced this. Someone who has just won't speak up, won't say anything negative, and it's almost the worst from a client perspective because if you know what the problem is, sometimes you can actually deal with it, right? And if they're comparing to another broker or doing whatever they're doing, maybe it's not apples to apples and you haven't had a chance to share, and then it's too late. So S's, you need to peel back the layers. You need to ask the questions. You need to say, so what do you think? What would be something that would stop you from taking advantage of this policy? What's something that would stop you from a colleague perspective in bringing that up to so-and-so, right? Really understanding where their head is. What would be the biggest thing that would stop you here from thinking this might be successful? Or what's your perspective on this? You need to peel back those layers. But S's and C's don't like to be tackled in a meeting necessarily. This could be something that you could do in advance. Or say it's a client and they've got the CEO is going to be there as well, but the S is the CFO, for example. Well, then you need to maybe talk quietly with the CFO first to kind of really understand where their head is before you go into the CEO, maybe who's the D, and it's going to tell you how it is anyway. Okay, so that's one piece I wanted to make a comment on because in terms of a client relationship, it's really significant. So time-wise, right on the, I'm just going to run through at least a couple of these to kind of give you a little bit more information, and then we'll finish up and we'll get more into the adapting piece and what you do with all these styles, the styles of others next time. So the strengths and challenges of a D. So Ds are do-it kind of people. They get her done. They take charge. They make sure that you hit your bottom line. They'll do whatever it takes to get that done. Sometimes to a fault, but hey, they can be a pit bull, and they'll get her done. As long as they keep the people in mind, they can do it very successfully. They're thinking outside the box, and they're willing to take new things on. They don't like to be put into, like you can see the little graphic there of compliance rules and regulations. They don't like a lot of that. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. It's almost like a racehorse that you're holding back at the gate. They feel restricted by those. They are not people that you want to have a lot of personal conversations with as such, because, and don't take this wrong, those people that are very people oriented here, but they just don't really want to hear it. Not that they don't care as such, it's not what they're there to do. Okay, so sometimes when I'll ask a D, so how do you feel about the small talk? They're like, really? Why? Why can't we just get to the situation, whatever we're trying to deal with that day with work? Okay, so they can come across a little strong. So that's actually one of the things I deal with the most when I'm working with Ds. I'll just run through I's for sure. So I's are very optimistic, sometimes to a fault, don't like to be critical. They love looking at ideas and possibilities and inspiring other people to action. The best thing for an I is to actually sit in a room and talk about, ooh, how can we make this better? Ooh, we could do this and we could do that. That'd be amazing. So thinking about those things is excellent. And they create those solutions through people. So in terms of what's tough, they don't like routines. They don't like the detail orientation at all. So remember, their opposite is a C if you look diagonal. So they don't like the detail record keeping. If they had, like I've had the luxury of having an assistant who I've always made sure is a C to keep me on track, because it's just not my strength. I can do it, but it's not my happy place. So can get very bored. They love lots of things happening. They can be very bored in any situation where they're doing repetitive things, and they just like to move on and see what's next. Can be a little bit of shiny object distracting them a little bit. So, all right. So how did you find curious? So first of all, if you have a sense of what you might be, how you're finding this. I know this is tough to do kind of on a webinar. So I'm just curious how you're finding learning about DISC. You see there's some value in it. Just pop a little note in the chat. You can do it private as well. And I'm happy to tweak for next time. But the next time we're going to get into, okay, that's fine and dandy. Here's what you are. But now let's talk about when your client is one of these, or your colleague or your boss, what you need to do to meet their needs so you can have a better relationship. So we'll talk in a couple of weeks, and yeah, please let me know. It'd be greatly appreciated. Have a great day, guys.